So my next guest, Major General Rupert Jones, the former Standing Joint Force Commander. And now we're gonna discuss the situation on the front line with him. So hello and welcome.
Good evening and very nice to see you.
Yeah, likewise. So Ukraine is preparing for a large-scale counteroffensive right now. And what goals can official Kyiv achieve, and where will the Kremlin be stopped?
Well, I think in terms of where Kyiv will try and retake, I think would ultimately be speculation, because the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense will be studying all the latest analysis to see where they've got the very best chance of making a breakthrough. And of course, the Ukrainian government, the Ukrainian military have demonstrated over the last year they're very, very good at deception. So they'll get us all looking in one direction, we commentators, but also the Russians, and then they'll attack elsewhere. I think what's more significant is not where they'll attack, but what they will seek to achieve. Mm-hmm. So I think in terms of what they will look to do, it is fundamentally to break the deadlock. It is since the liberation of Kherson late last year that the battlefield has been quite static through the winter. It's been very attritional, and I think what Kyiv will seek to do is to change that, to break through the Russian lines, which they did so effectively last year, to begin to maneuver again, to take the initiative into their own hands. So I think that's what matters. Where they do it will be the subject of very detailed study by the intelligence staff.
Do you expect that this counteroffensive, comparing to what we've seen last fall, would be more enormous, like in size?
Well, I think potentially, because what was so clever about the offensives last year is they took considerable ground with relatively few forces.
That's right.
Now, the Russians may well not fall for that again. Of course, what's changed since then is we're beginning to see more and more Western equipment come onto the battlefield. And of course, only this week, we've seen the first Leopard 2s arriving, the British Challenger tanks have arrived, and although they're coming in quite small numbers so far, they give those Ukrainian forces a real edge at a tactical level.
Is the weapon we got right now enough to start the counteroffensive, or not yet?
Well, ultimately, that's where the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense will be doing really careful analysis. Do they want more? Definitely. Do they need more? Yes. But does that stop them trying to get a breakthrough now? Not necessarily. And I think that'll be a really carefully judged equation. I think we've only heard today that Spain have confirmed that their 6 Leopard 2s will arrive in early April. So the pipeline is coming. Of course, Kyiv want more, and they want more faster.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. So the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Valery Zaluzhny, emphasized that Ukrainian defenders need Western F-16 fighter jets. So why the whole West is delaying that?
Yeah, it's such a difficult conversation, this, isn't it? Because you know much better than I. Over the last year, NATO nations have tried to moderate the equipment they've provided to you in Ukraine, and they've done it because they've been trying not to trigger President Putin into expanding the war further. As you know, President Putin, whenever he gets a little bit rattled, he makes threats of nuclear weapons. Mm-hmm. I judge those to be empty threats, but countries take them very seriously. And the other thing, of course, NATO have been trying to do is keep the alliance unified. And different countries within the alliance see things slightly differently. So that's the big issue. When it comes to F-16 specifically, because, some months ago, people had said, well, we'll never provide Western tanks. And yet here we are providing Western tanks. Yeah. So why not F-16s? Well, I confess it frustrates me because I think we've got to a situation where we know, well, we can be reasonably confident that President Putin isn't going to expand the war further. Never say never, but it doesn't look as though he's going to. So why not provide the aircraft now? We know there's a long lead time, maybe 6 months, but so start the clock now. Start training the crews, just like we had to do with the tanks. The other thing with the F-16, 26 countries around the world have been given export F-16s, including countries like Iraq. So I confess I find it quite frustrating they haven't been given to Ukraine, but it comes down to that trying to judge what equipment to give without provoking Russia. It comes down to a sense that, will the F-16s be able to be used effectively? There's, as you know, very, very effective air defense. So will the F-16s, to what degree will they be effective? For my money, I would like an announcement that F-16s can be provided, let the 6-month training clock start, and who knows where we're going to be by, the autumn of this year.
Thank you for this sincere answer. But let's continue. So the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Alexei Reznikov, he believes that the Russian offensive continues in full swing, but the Russians are quickly exhausting their offensive capabilities due to the Ukrainian forces holding Bakhmut, which remains the Ukrainian fortress. So when Ukraine launches the spring counteroffensive, so is there any other point which town can become the Bakhmut II or Bakhmut II?
Yeah. So I mean, firstly, can I say, as an ex-British soldier, looking at how the Ukrainian forces have fought over the last year, but not least in how they fought at Bakhmut, I have nothing but admiration for their courage and their ingenuity and their determination. But Bakhmut, as you know, has been a brutal fight. And the Russians have suffered very, very significant attrition around Bakhmut. As you know, the head of the Wagner Group has admitted that it has very badly damaged his force.
Yeah, that's right.
But I send my greatest sympathies to the Ukrainian military because, of course, you two have suffered heavy casualties. It's been a heavy price to hold Bakhmut, but it's been so important to drive down Russian forces there, but also it's become iconic, hasn't it? President Putin wants to take that town of Bakhmut for iconic purposes, and Kyiv isn't going to let that happen. In terms of a second Bakhmut, I strongly hope that there won't be a second Bakhmut, and what I mean by that is if the Ukrainian forces can achieve a breakthrough, they don't want attritional warfare. Your military are at their best when they're maneuvering, when they're being innovative, and they're taking ground fast in lightning advances. Either that or doing what you did in Kherson, where very, very cleverly using deep fires to degrade the Russians' command and control and logistics. So I think for all of us, we hope there won't be a Bakhmut II.
Yeah, we all hope. My next question is quite difficult, but still. Ukrainian expert and journalist Vitaly Portnikov, he was answering the question, what will happen the day after Ukraine will has liberated all its territories in 1991 borders? And he said, so what will happen the next day? There is gonna be a missile attack on Kyiv. So what could become the beginning of the real ending in this war? And do you believe that liberating all the territory of Ukraine is automatically means that the war is over?
Well, I think that, firstly, I would say it's always so difficult to predict what will happen. But, your President Zelensky has remained adamant that the total liberation of Ukraine is his aim. But I think we need to be, realistic that wars tend to end with talk, not with fighting. They end with talk. The difficulty we've got in this war, or you have in this war in particular, is that President Putin, he doesn't compromise. He shows no weakness. So how you get to a situation where he can save some degree of face, and that's very difficult, I'm sure, for President Zelensky to accept. But wars tend to end in some kind of compromise. What that will look like is for diplomats. What I would say as a soldier is what we militaries have to do is to create as strong a position on the battlefield as possible when the guns fall silent. Because holding ground, holding as much ground as possible, being in a position of advantage when the talking starts is absolutely vital. And that's why it seems to me this offensive, this spring offensive, when it comes from the Ukrainian Armed Forces, is so important. Because, time doesn't last forever. The Ukrainian military, as you know so much better than I, is suffering heavily. The Ukrainian people is suffering heavily. And, the sooner you can get yourself into a position where the war stops, hopefully with all of Ukraine liberated, but if not, in the strongest possible position, that has to be in Kyiv's interests.
Yeah, but I'm afraid there's going to be a situation when, for example, we have a very successful counteroffensive, and after that, Russian Federation is waiting for the next wave or the next step for the counteroffensive, and then the situation can be like forever, for like 3, 5, 4 years. And the main question is here: is the West ready to help us as long as it takes?
And of course, that's a question that ultimately no one can answer.
Yep.
Because you feel the fight in Ukraine. It's your country. It's your people dying. We're sitting, in many ways in blissful ignorance in the rest of Europe, and we're sending you arms. We're giving you all of our support. We're giving you all that emotional support. But it's not us who's fighting and dying. And West democracies are selfish. That's the reality. That's how politics work. And there'll be a British general election in 2 years' time. There'll be a new president in the United States. Well, or President Biden will get re-elected. That democratic process continues. And I guess, and President Zelensky knows this better than anybody, he can't take this level of support for granted forever. And I guess ultimately that's what President Putin is trying to do, is play out the West. He'll struggle to play out Kyiv, but he might hope he can play out the West, the rest of Western Europe.
But still, let's hope for the victory as soon as it's possible. Thank you so much for being the guest of Spotlight Ukraine. Major General Rupert Jones was my guest, and we continue. Thank you once again. Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Latest news, trends, and analytics on all about Ukraine. Like, share, and subscribe. Any questions, proposals, and comments, contact us via email.